It is time to start reading the Earthseed Duology by Octavia E. Butler. But first, let me try not to cut this. Starting with Parable of the Sower. Come along with me as I read both of these books. I mean, this was already kind of predicting where we're at right now. In this current time in life, in this country, in 2024, 2025. I'm going to read and see if there's any more, like, I don't know, predictions. In the words of Keenan Kell, here we go. So I am 46 pages into Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. Why is there hotep in here? Why is there hotep in this book? It's so funny. Let me read it. Let me read it right quick for you. The Mosses don't come to church. Richard Moss has put together his own religion, a combination of the Old Testament and historical West African practices. He claims that God wants men to be patriarchs, rulers and protectors of women, and fathers of as many children as possible. He's an engineer for one of the big commercial water companies, so he can afford to pick up beautiful, young, homeless women and live with them in polygamist relationships. He could pick up 20 women like that if he could afford to feed them. Like, it's so, like, this book is so connected to what's going on right now, but it's also a testament to the fact that, like, so much of what we see now and experience now, especially on the internet, has always been there for a long time. Beyond that, so far the book has been really good. I've read dystopian before. I've read The Hunger Games. I'm trying to think of what other dystopians I've read before, but mainly The Hunger Games. But this one just feels very dystopian. And then the fact that, like, it mirrors so much of what is going on now. And then too, like, I'm reading this in 2025, and the story is set in 2024 to 2025. So it's just like, and their lives feel a lot worse than ours. It's just as bad, but it just feels worse than ours. They're just so much darker. It's just such a darker dystopian. It just feels like y'all just gotta ride bikes around. Y'all could barely get water. People are robbing and stealing from people and burning stuff down. And it's the United States of America. And it's just like, that's crazy. And then they still having elections going on. And they still sending people to like, into space. And it's just like, but the people, yeah, it's a mess. It's a mess. This is crazy. This is crazy. It does talk a lot about religion and understanding what religion is, understanding what God is, who God is. This book is deep. It's very layered. Octavia E. Butler is very thoughtful. And she's making you really think about religion, think about God, reconsider, like, what is God to you, or what does God mean, or question, like, what you've learned about who and what God is. But I don't know, this book is really making me think about all that stuff, and I am looking forward to reading some more. Yeah, child, baby, we gonna talk some more. Parable of the Sower it's a lot. It's a lot. Especially at a time like this right now, and this time that we living in, at this very moment. Like, as I'm reading this, I feel like, am I doing enough? Am I doing enough? Because I don't feel like I'm doing enough. And I don't know, man. And I feel like this book, compared to how we're living life right now, it's not... how we're living right now, it's not as bad as in the book. The book feels a lot more... it feels a little bit more Walking Dead dystopian. It feels a little bit more Hunger Games in District 12, kind of, a little bit, but, like, in the suburbs. Yeah, we gonna need... we gonna need to get prepared. I don't know, girl, not, prepared. Get you a bag packed, a to-go bag packed. The book is talking about not making people scared, but it's also, we got to get prepared. Like, you got to take your Krav Maga classes. You got to pack your rations, learn some new things, learn the medicines and stuff. Like, baby, I don't know, girl. I'm scared. Like, this book, she's shaking me a little bit. I'm just like, I don't know, girl. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. This book is a lot. I've been laying in bed reading Parable of the Sower for I don't know how long because I am thoroughly engrossed in this book. I have thoughts. I have at least 3 thoughts. First thought is my girl Laura. She got a man. She's got a little. I want to say she has daddy issues, but daddy issues isn't the right term. Daddy issues is just like the title of what we'll just call what's going on with her right now, because she ain't got her daddy no more. But like, there's this older man that my girl is just like, oh, he's looking good. Like my boy, like he's handsome, and she's just like, but he's like 1 year older than her father, and I'm just like, girl, what? You trying to be with this man that's older than your daddy? But she's like, oh, he fine though, and he looked like he got a little money, from back in the day or something like that. So I'm like, girl, I mean, like I get it, Sometimes an older man, it's a thing. It's something. It's kind of, they know, sometimes they know what they're doing and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't know what they're doing because they're selfish. But then also because they've had experience, they know something. But he's kind of rich. He came from like, his history. He had a lot of money back in the day, well dressed, well groomed, got a little lineup and everything back in the day, really good shoes, really good outfits. So, maybe, he's a man, a well-established man, so he knows how to handle himself. He knows how to please a lady, you know what I'm saying? But then again, he might not because he's vain, so he might be very selfish. So I don't know, girl. I don't know. Hey, girl, open your legs to single men. Open your legs to rich, single, handsome men. Like, open it. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm legit opening it, and y'all can't see the opening. Never mind that. There's that, and then there's also how much we take our health for granted, and to an extent we kind of do, but I also feel like the society we live in, at least in the United States, takes our health for granted. It does not make health accessible to us. So, becoming handicapped, becoming sick, like in this kind of dystopian world, please live in the world that we're living in right now. My life could fall apart just because like I sprained my ankle. Or I got a little cut and that turned into an infection. But you could get a toe fungus and that could turn into your entire foot being like needing to be amputated. You just don't know. And especially in a time when things are just made to be harder. Maybe I don't have the words. I don't have enough of the knowledge and education to like really break it down. And how much you take for granted stuff like water. Like water in this book is like, it's scarce, it's hard to come by, it can be polluted, you have to like go to like centers and stations, water stations to get your water, you have to risk it. I don't know, it's just like you have to risk water. It's that's crazy. I don't know, girl. I'm gonna really need to get the survival handbooks and stuff like that and figure that shit out. This book's a little stressful. Then there's also like the Earthseed religion or belief that Laura has. I kind of vibe with it. I kind of like it. I kind of get it. But I also kind of see how it can be like a cult. And I feel like in the future, once this this dystopian apocalyptic world settles, I can see how Earthseed can become a cult in the future. But hopefully, it's not a bad cult. I mean, are any cults good? Are any cults ever good? But hopefully, like, it can become a community that is beneficial to people and is not one that is exploitative and destructive to people. But then again, you can say the societies and the lives that we live, the countries that we live in, are kind of cults. So, and some can be beneficial while also being exploitative. I don't know, girl. I don't know. I don't have all the knowledge. I still have to sit down and think about these things and probably write notes about them, but I don't know everything. Earthseed also reminds me of Do You Think of Terra 2? Because in that book, there is I guess a religious sect or a group of people or a cult called the New Creationists in Do You Dream of Terra 2, who are, their ultimate goal is to get to space and to live on another like inhabitable planet and restart life in a brand new way, in a more positive, beneficial way. And that's kind of what Earthseed wants to do in the end. And like, well, not in the end, but that's what their highest goal is. But beyond death, but well, before death, is to like live in a more idealized, better life, and understand that like change is inevitable, and change is all that we have, and all that we really expect, I guess, besides death. But it's so interesting that Earthseed and the New Creationists are kind of similar in that way, that they have the same kind of like goal to eventually get to outer space and get to living away from Earth, maybe on a spaceship, eventually getting to a different planet, like a Earth 2, Terra 2 kind of planet where they can restart life and live better than they lived on Earth. Do You Dream of Terra 2 and The Walking Dead also kind of made me realize that so many people, like, you realize how many people and how much media that we might know more of is inspired by Octavia E. Butler's writing and her work. So much of this book reminds me of The Walking Dead, like the kind, like people coming together, the use of the term walkers. Although walkers is more like a superficial thing, like, it makes sense. Like, I feel like I could see how something like walkers and the idea of like other people kind of almost are, in a way, they're almost kind of walking dead alongside you. Although these are actual human people that can be alive, they're on their way to like death easily, because some of them aren't prepared for what is happening in the world for them, and they're just trying to survive, and they'll end up dead. But for now, they're walking, and they're probably walking to their death. Them moving from town to town in different places and meeting different kinds of people, it just reminds me of The Walking Dead so much. It almost makes me feel like Robert Kirkman he probably read Octavia Butler, he probably read Parable of the Sower, and it kind of gave him some ideas on how to write The Walking Dead, I'm assuming. Because so it feels like The Walking Dead. It feels like people coming together, meeting people from different, like, as you're moving along on your journey, you're meeting these different people and you're trusting them and becoming allies with them. And Terra 2 with the New Creationists and wanting to go to space, it reminds me so much, like, it reminded me of Earthseed in Parable of the Sowers. I feel like there's so much more other media that I'm more familiar with that probably takes so much more inspiration from Octavia E. Butler, and I just probably, need to read more Octavia E. Butler to see the comparisons and the connections. According to Parable of the Sower, there is a high chance that corporate slavery is coming. And I'm not just talking corporate slavery like, oh, you work in and paycheck to paycheck is not enough. Like, I'm talking about like chattel slavery. Like, they will steal your kids and sell them off to somebody else or somewhere else. They will work you to death, not pay you. So much of this book is happening right now, and it's been happening for a while. Like, for instance, if you work on like a corporate owned like farm, you're only working there because you're desperate. You need to be fed. You need housing. Like, you're working for mainly that. You're not really working for money. Anything that's considered money that you're working for is technically like Robux. It's like credits. When Microsoft had Zune, like, the only way you could buy music is if you bought credits. They do it with Xbox, where you can buy credits to buy games. So it's like you could buy credits to buy music and shit like that. That's kind of what you work for. You just work for like credits that you could only use with this corporate farm that you're working at. You could end up in debt with that. I'm assuming that those credits are, I wouldn't say worthless, but they're just kind of like undervalued. Like, way less value than money. You could work as much as you want for the credits, but you'll never be able to work enough to like pay back the corporation for the housing and food that they're supplying you. The housing and food is like this high premium, and you're only making so much. Basically, they're preying on the fact that like you're desperate. At this point, you're just like, I want to survive. I'll try and survive. I'll try and make something work. This feels like a warning, a foreshadowing of like, okay, if you end up in a situation like this, know that this is a trap. It is slavery. They're just trying to enslave you. And I feel like so much of that, like, we're getting ready for that, because with AI taking people's jobs, corporations, which are already running the United States as it is, they could come in and like swoop in and like buy up a whole bunch of corporations and businesses and all kinds of stuff, set up desperate situations for us to be in. And then we are forced to like see them as like the only hope for us to work. And then because we're desperate, they can use whatever tactics they want to use on the. I don't know. This book had me thinking a lot about that. But the bright side is that there's a chance that a lot more of us that are like-minded individuals or like-minded people would come together, buy plots of land, build housing, and build a life like them white people did in Oregon. Was it Oregon? I don't know. Like them white people did when they went to the rural state and decided we just want our all-white town. I do think that's probably something that's going to happen more going into the future if it just gets harder like that, because people will be like, shit is getting too hard. It's getting too weird. We gonna need to cut. Like, let's pool our money together, build a nice little compound situation, do our own farming, do our own build our own houses, all of that. There's the all black city that is being built, or I think it's already built. I'm not sure. I have to do some more reading on that. The all black city in Freedom, Georgia. I feel like more stuff like that is gonna come. And my thing is, if you're gonna build it, you definitely gonna need a defense force. You're gonna need to be able to protect and defend your stuff, because girl, you're gonna need to have at least, some good technology and stuff, like, to make sure you're protecting your stuff. When intruders or anybody coming for your stuff, you're gonna need to protect it. We're gonna need to protect it. I think that's the bright side, is that, like, there's gonna be more community connection coming together and, like, building safe havens as different kinds of people, different marginalized groups, whether it's like predominantly black people coming together, whether it's just POC people coming together that are just like-minded, or whether it's just like black LGBTQ people deciding, oh, we gonna get us a nice little compound, we gonna set up our stuff, we gonna protect it, we gonna have architects in there building stuff up. Which is funny, because right now I never watch Wild Country. What is it, Wild Country or Wild Wild Country? I believe it's like a Hindu cult that which is funny, they moved to Oregon to set up their commune. They set it up because they had like all kinds of different people in there. They had like architects, they had like people that can manage money, all kinds of different people in there. So I think building up communities like that, you're gonna need a lot of different kinds of like smarts and skills and intellectuals and all kinds of people to come together to kind of make stuff like that. People who know how to grow stuff, people who know how to build buildings, not just build it, but design a building to build, how to lay out plans and stuff on like how to lay out the land, all that stuff. Like, I think that's kind of part of why the whites only community failed, because they didn't have the skilled a lot of the skills needed to kind of really establish it well. It was just kind of a lot of, I think I know what I'm doing people who went in and said, I know, I'm just going, I know how to build a house. I can build it. It's easy. I could put two and two together and figure it out. And it's like, I think you might need a little bit more education than that. Overall, this book, it had me doing a lot of thinking. I need to be prepared. I definitely feel like I need to do a reread of this, and I need to have a notebook with me, or at least a highlighter, and just highlight all the parts where she's talking about preparation and she's talking about like what things to look out for, what to watch out for. I feel like if you've never read this book and you plan to read it, you definitely should. I feel like it's good to at least read this before next year. I'm not even trying to scare nobody or nothing, but I feel like when this book hit 2026, shit really, really started to go down in this story. And I'm a little worried that 2026 is when things might, I don't know, things might get a little weird for us here. And we just got to be prepared to stick and move, to make our moves and adjust. Also, I had a great time reading this. I enjoyed this so much. I do appreciate the epistolary style of kind of writing. I really was engaged with it. I connected with it. I was engrossed in it. I felt like I was there. It felt like I was in The Walking Dead, but without the zombies, and it's real life. I'm scared, and I'm a little tired already. And I didn't have to go, I didn't have to deal with what they were dealing with in this book. Thank you for spending your time with me, and I am out this bitch like Flea.